Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today I will be sharing with you all my September wrap up. I honestly debated whether or not it was worthwhile to film this video because I haven't read a lot this month, and I know I said that for August, but I really have not read a lot this month. But I decided that it was worthwhile because for my sake and keeping records and just really consistency, I decided to make a video. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first book that I read in the month of September was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, a novel of the plague. This book is set in 1850 England with a young Latin tutor, otherwise known as who we know as Shakespeare, and he falls in love with Agnes, a beautiful young woman who lives next door. She might be a little eccentric, but they both love each other very much. They get married, they have children. He starts his career as a writer. Meanwhile, at the same time, the Black Death or the plague is coming across the land and really infecting lots of different communities. And of course, it strikes the family of Shakespeare. And so while Shakespeare is out in London enjoying his success as a newly rising star in the theater world, his only son is struck by the plague and he has to rush home. This book is actually the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction, and then it was a finalist and longlisted, etc., for other awards. And it was one of the 10 best books of 2020 according to the New York Times. So I definitely had heard a lot about this book. If you have seen my book shopping vlog and as well as my book haul in the month of August, this is actually one of the books that I picked up because I wanted a book for the plane, as well as my newly settled life in France. I really wanted a book in English to provide some comfort and some normalcy. I also picked up this book because I'd heard a lot about it, loved the cover, and as an English major, the whole Shakespeare retelling and reinterpretation of part of his life was really, really fascinating to me. I'm giving this book 4.5, maybe even 5 stars out of 5. I haven't quite decided. I'm still kind of going back and forth. I finished this book about 30 minutes ago, just in time to film this video. But I definitely really enjoyed it. Maggie O'Farrell's ability to really portray human emotions and human relationships between parents and children, between siblings, between man and wife, between brother and sister. It's top notch. The emotions, the wide range of emotions, really powerful, really speaks to you. And I found it incredibly moving. But the historical context and setting were really well done and convincing and realistic. At least to me, it felt like it was actually set in 16th century England. I thought the dynamics between the different families, the flipping back and forth between different times and places was really well done. I thought that Maggie O'Farrell had really interesting ways of taking what we know from history and what we know from Shakespeare's life and other people who were living during that time, and then making it her own and kind of adding her own spin on it. I think the exploration of death and love and the way that it impacts different people in different ways, obviously, and just how everyone grapples with the hard things in life differently, but also the beautiful things in life. Put it simply, I cried for about an hour on the train when I was reading this book. It was a little embarrassing because I was wearing a mask on a public train with a bunch of strangers, and I was just crying because I couldn't stop. This book was hitting me in the feels. But I also really just love a book that can make me cry like that because it just shows how much it's speaking to me. But enough of that rambling. The reason why I'm not really sure if I want to give it 5 out of 5 stars is because I wasn't the biggest fan of the point of view or the writing style that Maggie O'Farrell chose. It was very removed, kind of the omniscient narrator that was looking upon everything. I found that a little disconcerting, and I thought it was only going to last for the beginning of the book, but it went for the entire book. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I didn't really enjoy it, and but at the same time, I was astounded that the author was able to make me and allow me to connect with the characters so deeply. The other thing that I didn't like is, I don't really want to spoil it, but basically there are some infidelity issues, and I didn't really like the way that was handled. That's like a big thing for me. I don't like that. And I did not like the way it was dealt with, and maybe that was accurate for the time, maybe not, but I was not the biggest fan of that. All in all, really enjoyed this book. Glad I got it. I'm really, really impressed. Like, I convinced myself I wasn't gonna like this book, and then it hit me. So yes, definitely recommend. Next book that I read was actually a short story entitled Maisontellier by Maupassant. And this book basically is a short story, and it follows a group of women who own and operate a brothel that the men of the town often frequent. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the brothel is closed, it's shut down. This is shocking to all the men, and it is because of this really vague sign that says there is a first communion. So that's really all I'm going to tell you, so I don't really spoil it. But I gave this book, or this short story, 2.5 out of 5 stars. I honestly would have given it less, but after reading some reviews, I changed my mind a little bit. My first reading through, though, I read this for a French literature class. I did not like the way that the women were described. They're really objectified. I found some of the content to be anti-Semitic and also just really offensive to women in general. And I really did not enjoy the way that women were constantly being violated, and it just did not read well to me. And of course, it's written from a man's perspective, meaning the author is a man, so I just did not appreciate that. But after reading some reviews and reading more about the author, I understood what he was trying to do and where he was coming from. And I definitely could appreciate the solidarity among women and the way that all of the prostitutes and all of the women were able to come together and really form their own community. I thought there was a really interesting perspective on religion, and it was a little beautiful to read for those moments. But all in all, I didn't really like the book. It didn't sit well with me. I don't think it's aged well. I really was wondering why we read it. And yeah, so we have our discussion for this week in class, and we'll see what happens with that. But in addition to that short story, we also had to read Un Cœur Simple, or Simple Heart by Flaubert. And that short story follows a young maid who has endured a lot of hardships in her life, and she just really has a simple heart and really follows faithfully and just continues to love the way that she can. And that's basically what happens in that book. I don't want to give too much away again, but I gave that short story 2 out of 5 stars because I hated that short story. I did not really see a purpose for it. I read a lot of reviews, and they were talking about how it was so sincere and heartrending and beautiful, and that the main character, the maid, she just had such a beautiful soul, and she just really was trying to live her life the way that God would want her to, or other things along those lines. And I mean, I didn't read it that way. It was like a little comical at times, with just the death after death after death, and then also just really disturbing with some of the content in it as well. I did not enjoy it at all. I also was confused as to why we read it. I mean, I know we were reading them because they're really famous French authors, but like, again, I'm not really sure what it did for me, and I don't recommend. The last short story that we read was Mustang by Maëlys de Kerangal, and I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. This short story is in a brand new collection of hers, and it came out in 2021 actually. This basically takes place in Colorado actually, and it follows the narrator who has upended her life to live with her, I think, boyfriend and their young child, and then really as she's searching and grappling with America, the West, the identity of all of that, language, and Mustang being the American sports car. So yeah, that's what that story is kind of about. I was really fascinated by this book, first of all, because it was really interesting to read a more modern French piece of literature, because I have, for the most part, read older pieces like Candide or Le Petit Prince or Indiana or any of those. So it was definitely interesting to read that. I thought that the author did a really great job with the descriptions of time and place and really the environment. I also thought it was an interesting perspective on differing cultures between France and America, specifically Colorado. There were some really great themes about identity, sense of place, belonging. I thought those were really, really great to read from, and I just found it refreshing after reading Flaubert and Maupassant. I have to reread all of those short stories a few more times throughout the class because we're gonna have papers on them, so I will reread them at some point, but I definitely enjoyed that one the most, and I do want to look into other works by Mayalisa Carangal because I think she did a really great job with that short story, and I am interested in other books that she's written because she is quite a prolific writer. Yeah, but those are all of the books / short stories that I read in the month of September. If you have any questions, book recommendations, video recommendations, leave them down in the comments below. This video was a little hectic, a little scatterbrained, but thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week. Book, if you've seen my shop, I cannot speak English anymore.